I want to talk real quick about the power of sequels and remakes to make you want to revisit the original.
Okay,
I'll tell you right now, Donnie Darko was a movie I saw right when it came out, and I hated it.
See, I'm going to say, right.
But when Blockbuster closed, I was frantically going in because movies were $1, and I was just nabbing movies that looked familiar, and I grabbed a copy of S. Darko, which is the direct-to-video sequel to this movie, which apparently a lot of people hate. But I grabbed a copy of it because I just saw it and it looked familiar to me. Well, I couldn't watch it because it'd been so long since I'd seen the first movie. I was like, I got to revisit it. So I revisited the first Donnie Darko today in order for us to talk about it, and I have a very different reaction to it.
I do too, because initially I I don't get this.
Yeah.
It is not speaking to me because I just graduated from college and I think it was a teenager movie. And maybe I was like, I'm not a teenager anymore and I don't know what they're talking about. But I understand this was a massive cult following when it came out.
Yeah.
Kids flocked to the theaters to see this movie.
Yeah, so it's important, because when we talk about things like 15 Hellraiser movies have been out or something like that, and it's like, why do they keep making these movies? Well, at the very worst, even if the sequels or remakes are terrible, you will always go back to the original then, and you might see something new. So cherish your remakes, cherish your sequels, and we'll see whether or not we cherish Donnie Darko today. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram. You can comment and talk to us as well. Hey, we do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great options. And today we're going to talk about, I don't know, is this a superhero movie? They talk about in the movie is Donnie Darko.
Well, I even wondered, did we put this on Scary Movie Saturdays originally? And I was like, it's so weird. But we're going to try and decipher Donnie Darko. After Donnie Darko's family narrowly avoids dying in a strange accident, he finds himself visited upon by a man named Frank in a rabbit suit, who tells him that the world will end in a matter of weeks. As Donnie is manipulated into committing several crimes, he starts looking into ways to stop the cataclysm that's rapidly closing in.
Okay, so this is Richard Kelly, right?
Yes.
And I think he has a lot of influences in this movie. I think you can see a lot of L.A. noirs. I think you can see a lot of course, David Lynch movies. This is very much like if you watch Blue Velvet and watch this, you think it's just almost a block down from where this happened from. So you have these elements of very let's deconstruct suburbia. And I think you get this a lot of social commentary in Fight Club. Where in the late 90s, I think a lot of people in my generation, maybe a little bit younger, you hadn't really a focus. There's, Tyler Turner talks about, you have no great war. You guys are just sitting pumping gas, buying things you don't need. So I think it's a lot about narrative, where do you want to do structure-wise with your life. I think if you talk Donnie Darko, it's almost like kids love why they love the movie They Graduate. He's done with college. He doesn't know what to do with his life. So it's very much trying to find the needle. And of course, when you have a concussion and you start seeing things...
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a film about a lost boy.
And you should wear a bike helmet, maybe, right?
Yeah. It's such an odd movie because, as we said, do we place it as a horror film? Do we place it as a what is it exactly? Is it a superhero movie? There's that question. And, of course, we have the Donnie Darko, the Peter Parker, or how they refer to, they call him Wade Watts in the Ready Player One movie, having that alliteration with the main character name. Is it a superhero movie? I don't know.
Yeah, because it even talks about that, right? Is it really, because they cast really his sister in this movie?
Yeah. So they were looking to see who they could cast in that role, and I guess someone had heard that Jake's sister was an actress, and so they showed some movie that she drank urine in. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
I remember hearing about that.
And that was what caused them to consider her for the role. So, we all do things for work, I guess.
Right, but I think Richard Kelly talks about this. It all came inspired about a story about an engine falling from the sky.
Yeah, that was the nugget that kind of came forward. And he was looking, I guess he was working as an assistant to someone in a post-production house. And they asked, what are you going to do with your life? Which is very much a graduate question, I guess. Very much a Donnie Darko question. And so he started crafting this idea of how can I...
This ex machina almost.
Yeah, so how do I work around this idea of a plane crash? Which is unfortunate for the filmmakers, especially timing-wise, that was a story point that wanted to come up because I do think it affected this film's ability to market itself. But it's something that comes out of, we have an idea, so we throw together a lot of things we like in order to make it work. And that is a very successful way to tell a story, but it does kind of make you feel then like it's a very globby kind of a story. There's a lot of stuff happening.
What do we need to do with this character? Well, it's almost like Ex Machina. We just drop it from the sky.
Yes.
And we have something, a vessel that everybody can talk about.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things that culminates in the thing I didn't like about this film the first time that I still don't like about this movie, and that is that Donnie is kind of an all-powerful god at times. We don't know what he's capable of doing. They never really outline any rules for it.
Awful?
And they don't even really tell us for certain that he can do some of the things he can do until he does them. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, I feel like we need to have some clarity on this one. And when we talked about Cube, I said, like, I'm okay with not knowing all the details. This is when I feel like I kind of wanted to know more details. Give us some scenes as he figures out what he's capable of doing, because he's a very special human being.
Right, because he was his therapist, he has imaginary friends, but also, like, when they're watching football, and you see, like, this, very much like for the movie Abyss with James Cameron, this Cube kind of thing. So
which I guess was inspired by Madden on the football things, where he would, like, do the little circles around people to showcase how they were running.
Yes.
So I guess that was the idea behind that.
Yeah. But I think it's the whole core of it is viscerating or just really tear apart the structure of suburban life. That you need a catalyst, something kids call like a trigger point to break you out of this thing. And I think that's what he's talking about with the dropping of the airplane.
Oh yeah.
And I think Richard Carlin likes to underwoven politics on kind of really. Aaron Sorkin likes to put it out loud. I think he likes to tamper with it just a little bit. He did with The Box. Obviously.
Yeah, The Box is a very political, anti-political movie.
Right, and he talked about with the beginning of this movie. I'm going to vote for Dukakis, and what the hell's wrong with you? Right.
Yeah, and that how that kind of suburban life, but even just alongside with that, I was leaning more into the high school aspect of it because we spend so much time with the other high schoolers. That high school is its own reality. And it's only once you leave high school that you realize what a weird reality high school is. Oh, yeah. And how you almost become a different person. You become a different version of yourself, an alternate universe, if you will.
It is a little bit, right?
High school, when you leave suburbia and go to someplace else.
Everybody talks about it when you leave. You're in high school. You're around your friends constantly, and then when you get out of college, you're at your job.
Yeah.
By yourself.
Yeah.
Your phone's not going off. You're almost have to deal with isolation. And I think that's another aspect, and thanks for bringing it up. Like, I think that's what Donnie Darko was talking about, that a transition, that you're going to be constantly kind of alone. And kids in their 20s, after getting a job, they realize, I go to work and then the weekend, and where is everybody?
Yeah, it's the aspect I miss most about college. I saw a tweet online that just, like, triggered something in my head of, like, college was a time period where you lived on a campus within walking distance of everyone you knew, and everything that you did, and you promoted being fascinated. You promoted trying new things. You promoted trying to learn more about the world. And it was this little, like, ecosystem that you, again, once you break outside, you realize what a weird ecosystem that was, and a strange reality. And I think that's where I kept going back to this film, because it talks about reality. It talks about other universes. And that's how I saw suburbia, is its own little universe in the world where people are worried about more things than they should be. Like, what is the one actress who said she was upset that Donnie told her to shove that card somewhere specific?
The teacher,
she's getting bothered by a student telling her to go screw herself more than she should be.
I worked with kids before, and if some kid told me that in the classroom, my first reaction was like, I don't think you can tell me what to do. You just got to bring up.
I would just have to question.
Yeah, rather than you call your mom and like you eviscerate them, right? Because I think that's why I like movies now more. When I went to college, of course I liked them as a kid and watched movies, but because when I was in college and you worked a video store and you're by yourself and you work late nights and then the door closes and you no longer have customers and you're there, what's your only friends? It's movies.
Yeah.
So you just put a movie on, and then because the vacuum of being social and environments and all that stuff. But then your only friends are now movies, and you just sit and watch them because, hey, they're people.
Yeah.
And you retain them.
They talk to me.
Yeah, they talk to me. This is kind of what Donnie Darko probably struck a nerve with me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he goes into the movie theater. And he goes with Jenna Malone.
Yeah. Yeah,
he's
Gretchen
kind of
Moss,
still alone, and he needs his partner to come talk to him.
Well, and as a guy who has a constantly sleeping wife, who has missed out on movies from beginning to end because she just fell asleep during the opening credits. I understood that pain.
I'm sure she's like, I'm watching.
My wife will never be allowed to fall asleep in a movie that I paid for. No.
I'm still watching. My wife does that too. I know I'm still watching. Yep.
Yeah, we created a rule in my house now where she goes, Kyle, I'm falling asleep. And I'm like, all right, we're finishing tomorrow. But yeah, so I think dealing with, like suburbia and high school and the things that matter more to us in that world.
It looks mundane as a movie.
Well, there's little mundane things. There's discussion about the sexual lives of Smurfs. Like, Those were conversations I had a lot more in high school than I probably do now, even though I still do.
Right, you have an argument of like when I was in high school, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and it becoming a heated debate.
Yeah, well, and being so focused on these odd elements of life, there's a joke that I wrote down that I thought was really clever because I had to actually look it up after the fact. I thought something didn't make sense here when they're talking about the Graham Greene book that they're not allowing the kids to read. And she says, I know Graham Greene. I've seen Bonanza. And I said, I think that's Lauren Greene.
Lauren Greene.
And
right.
so I looked it up and I was like, yeah, you're
very
wrong
good,
on
very
that.
Good,
so having that moment of like, again, people being completely unaware of what they're talking about, but wanting to seem like they know what they're talking about.
That's very high school.
It's very high school. It's very suburbia. It's very
I did in
small
high school
town.
too, right, yeah.
It's something that you have to deal with when you leave the small town and move to somewhere else, is that there's a different ecosystem. There's a different world up there.
So I think what it's talking about is the movie is break out of the mundane, really put a mirror on the mundane life. Like you go to the movies, watch movies to get away from your mundaneness, and then you put that on people's face.
Yeah.
They get agitated about it, and I think that's what kids like. That's my life.
Yeah.
But I don't have a talking rabbit that's telling me the end of the world is coming. Which, when this movie came out, we're like, oh, is this like a horror movie version of Harvey with Jimmy Stewart? Because Jimmy Stewart has imaginary buddy. Yeah.
It did sell itself as a horror movie, and I've become increasingly critical of this. The movies that I have found myself going against the grain and not liking as much as many others are movies that are marketed as horror and aren't. I really didn't like Midsommar when it came out, and it's not a horror movie. I didn't like The Lighthouse when it came out because it's not a horror movie. The only reason I love The Lighthouse now is because my wife loved it and she forced me to watch it again and again.
Closing your environment, and I think that's what it is.
And that's the problem with certain marketing aspects, is that this is a sci-fi movie, it may be a fantasy, but it's not a horror movie. It just has horrific elements to it, but it's sold as one, and that really that tinged the way I felt about the movie. I knew a friend of mine from middle school, I think, when this movie came out, who also hated this movie. And we used to talk about like nothing horrific happened. We expected a scary movie.
That's why we want to deliver on. Maybe he goes catatonic and just starts massacring everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another movie I want to mention before Ice Storm. Is another movie. I think it's kind of put in that environment where the parents are really not doing a good job developing their kids, and the kids have to raise themselves as the parents are acting almost irresponsible. And if you want to look, that movie came out in like a couple of years before this movie. Starring Sigourney Weaver and Kevin Kline. It's taking place in the 70s, and it's a little underweaving of politics as well. And I think you get it if you watch Ice Storm. I think you get appreciation of this movie because the parents aren't really doing a good job. The adults in the movie, how about that? The entire adult structure aren't doing a good job of developing the kids, and the kids are trying to figure it out as well.
They're lost and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So I think that's a wonderful aspect, and I think that if you watch Ice Storm, you can. It's the duration of suburbia. You can see where he wants to go as well.
Yeah, there's a line in the film that Drew Barrymore states, and again, Drew Barrymore and Christopher Nolan are both very important in getting this film released in a theater. You also have Francis Ford Coppola, who spoke with Kelly after reading the script and pointed out this specific line from Barrymore's character, which I don't have the whole thing in my head, but had to do with, the kids in this town, you feel bad for them because the parents, they don't have a clue, is what she says when she's packing up her box. And Francis Ford Coppola turned to Kelly and said, "That's your movie," and walked out of the room. So I really think that's what it is.
Brick. I think Brick gets an inspiration a little bit because Brendan in the movie dresses almost like from this movie.
Yeah,
with the white shirt and the
there's
jeans.
No adults.
And there's no adults. So that transition of him starting with the white shirt and jeans and almost like that code of how to look. Very blue. This movie. Yeah, I think it's just like you do Singer color themed movies. Very blue. I think the colorization.
Velvet.
No, blue velvet, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it does have that similar look to it. And I also was thinking, back to our conversation on whether the film qualifies as horror. Frank, the bunny, I have a weird thought process with him because in many ways he is like Pinhead. And let me explain here, because in the Hellraiser mythology, Pinhead is a army guy that opens the box, gets killed. But the thing about it is that when you are killed in conjunction with those kinds of forces, you become detached from time.
Almost like Borg.
Yeah,
like the Borg.
And he is basically loosed from time in that way. In the Hellraiser mythology, we see Pinhead in the 1700s before the guy he was even born. We see him in the future, in space. That's kind of how Frank is in this movie. Is we see Frank's death, but we also see him before that. And I feel like that is actually Frank being dislodged from time when he is taken out. So there's a lot of really interesting sci-fi concepts to that.
And also, when you talk about a lot of, if you watch a lot of the psycho killers and everything, there's a divorce of themselves, a responsibility or construct. I didn't do this. This person told me to do this. Son of Sam.
Yeah,
I didn't
Son
do
of
this.
Sam,
I didn't do this. The dog told me to do this. I'm not responsible for my actions. And that's why I thought we were going to see a little more horror element with Donnie Darko. That he's getting a little more seduced by this demonic rabbit.
Yeah, because he's having that interplay with him, and I would have liked to have seen more of that, because we have James Duvall playing the character of Frank, who I knew from Independence Day and a couple other films. He's confined to this costume, so all of his voice performance needs to hold up the rest of the character, really.
Yes.
And I think the interactions between him and Donnie are more captivating than any other two people in the film, because we're not sure about Frank the entire time. And even when we get answers to Frank's existence, they don't give us all the answers, just enough to maybe question it more,
Another interesting component, because we were so fascinated that something like a very avant-garde, surreal movie, that Patrick Swayze in this movie. And it's almost like a takeaway, because I'm so used to him, like Dirty Dancing and Youngblood and, Next of Kin and Roadhouse, and here's this movie, and he's not dancing or kicking ass, he's just being this weird motivational speaker this side of Tom Cruise and Magnolia.
Not even just that, but not even just Patrick Swayze, but the amount of solid performers that are coming to kind of lift this film up. We get Drew Barrymore, we get Noah Wyle, we get Mary
Noah Wyle,
people holding up this movie so that people will go see it. Patrick Swayze's character, he's one of the more peculiar ones, because there's a lot of subplots involving him, and especially with the realization of who he is behind the eyes, behind the glass.
Yeah, because I watch a lot of critics that he was almost like a pedophile.
Yeah, very much. I mean, he had porn. I mean, very clearly, in his home.
Yeah.
And it's weird that his character, we don't really get a finale to what happened to him, because again, our ending of the film makes all of his reveals about him cease to exist in other people's lives. Yeah. So he's getting away with it, which is kind of like a crummy, scummy thing. Maybe the idea is that no matter what you do, some people are just going to get away with it. Maybe that's what they're saying about his character, but it's
Sometimes
not.
You're Rollo Tomasi.
Yeah, exactly. You're just out there,
Yeah.
It's a peculiar character arc, because it's not really a subplot. Doesn't really feel like it's closed ever. But what it says about him is disturbing. And maybe it's because it's Patrick Swayze that it's more disturbing.
It is kind of
we trust him,
right? And what are you doing in this movie? Are you a bad guy? You're frightening, right?
Yeah.
There's a comedic element to this movie that I don't think it was supposed to be funny at the time. But then you see Seth Rogen in this movie, and that guy in this movie before Freaks and Geeks.
This was his first feature film role.
Yeah.
Was this movie, and his first line of dialogue ever recorded was, "I like your boobs." So good on you, Seth Rogen.
Good to start your career, man.
Yeah.
We know where
I didn't realize
we know where your trajectory is going after this, right?
I did not realize he was in this movie. I don't even know if he remembers that he was in this movie. I read something funny that after the rap party, him and Jake Gyllenhaal finally got a chance to talk about the movie, and they both realized, we don't know what this movie's about. And I think that would be kind of a exciting thing, but kind of a concerning thing when you're playing such a high-level character in the film, is like, I don't know what this movie is about.
And that's what makes it why we're going to continue to talk about it, because there's so many different avenues, and it's almost like life. You don't really know where you're going. You don't have a driven force for focus. Sometimes you just need something to fall out of the sky to get you motivated.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to have a concussion to realize that life is fragile, and maybe you should concentrate a little more to yourselves and stuff like that. So and we talked about this. It's not the big events that go with life, but how you navigate your little days. So I think it's a contrast. So big events can happen, and that changes everything. But also the little things that keep going, the mundane things, is what also you have to struggle with.
A lot of little adjustments can mean as much as one big adjustment.
There, you always explain it better than I do. Right? Yeah.
It's every puddle is filled with drops. But I think that that's both a good and a bad thing about this movie. And it's the thing I still kind of reckon with, is that this is a movie where I don't think we get enough information. I don't think we get enough closure on the story. I think we get too many questions that are left unanswered. But at the same time, I looked up Richard Kelly's explanation for what's going on in the film, and it makes it worse. So that's the problem I have, is like, I think the film needs to have more to build it. But at the same time, what I did learn, and what a lot of people have learned after kind of researching his what he thinks happened, I didn't like it as much. Yeah. So it's kind of that lossless thing of like, it doesn't make me happy either way. I still think it's a pretty solid movie the second time through, but there are those little issues with, like, I don't think you had a good enough explanation for why, and you just let it happen.
And that's what fails with the movie, the box.
Yep.
Yeah. Because
the box is a different way, where it's maybe because I knew that Donnie Darko had no answers that I went into the box expecting no answers.
I think Richard Kelly likes to take the scenic route, but he's not going to take off the low-bearing fruit of cliches and everything. He's going to take the scenic route and try to go for the really good uppercuts.
Yeah, and he surrounded himself with some pretty strong people who were able to kind of move him around. His cinematographer was Stephen Poster, who did Strange Brew. So a very odd juxtaposition of films, but definitely people that have been in the business working for a while. And it looks like Richard Kelly is maybe returning to the world of Donnie Darko, because after the failure that was Southland Tales and the failure that was The Box,
which is very bizarre,
he has kind of circled back around to the big success that he had, and he's been working on a sequel since last year that would kind of ignore S. Darko because he had no involvement with that film.
Yeah.
And he reportedly hated it, or has not seen it. He hated the idea of it and just didn't watch it. But he has been circling back to kind of go back to this world, and I'm curious to think where you would go. Like, the story feels like there's an ending and that we've gotten.
But he's somebody that writes and it's a dead end. That's fine with him.
Yeah.
Almost, right.
I'm assuming that if he ever returns to this world, we're going to get more of an in-universe spin-off than we would a direct sequel. Because I just don't think any of the characters that we left at this point are important or integral. Maybe a Gretchen, story of her as an adult. I don't know.
Because he pitched this idea in a writer's workshop. Well, my story starts with an airplane crash hitting a teenager's room. What are you trying to convey here? Right?
Yeah.
So if that's the catalyst, and then you spiderweb everything around. Because I could see the writer's board. That happens. Where we go from here, here, here. Where you let's come back to this.
Yeah,
a little bit more.
Yes, it's a movie that it's hard to explain, and I can understand why he spent a year of his life trying to sell the script, trying to go from place
because there's
to
no
place
clarity, and that's
I think a lot of studios look at a film like this and they're saying, how do we market this? And unfortunately, then you get a movie that was trying to market it one way, had to move things out of the way because you can't have a plane crash on your poster after 9/11.
Yeah.
And then it also had an issue of the film deals with elements of teen suicide, but this was also following Columbine, and so most studios didn't want to deal with trying to market a film that seemed to promote elements of teen suicide or seemed to bring those into question. So you have a really difficult marketing job, which is most of what studios care about. How do we market this movie?
And you think, I think why teenagers like this movie at the time, if you think about it, when you were a teenager, you like to muck things up for the adults, just to muck things up.
Like that scene with him and Patrick Swayze at the when he's explaining that he's a poser.
So the entire you remember being a teenager, and the adults are in charge. You want to see him to muck things up for them so nothing goes smoothly. And I think that's the goal for Donnie. He's constantly mucking things up for the adults, including his therapist. He's not really honest with her.
Yeah.
And when she finally figures him out, he gets frustrated. Because
he's a kid that's when backed into a corner, he's gonna lash out. Because he doesn't do it to every person in the film, but it's the ones where he gets put into a corner and you're pushing him. That he does that to Patrick Swayze's character, to his parents, to his therapist, but he doesn't do it to Noah Wiley's professor. He doesn't do it to Drew Barrymore's teacher, because he has a respect for them. They are testing his mind. They are developing him in a way that he should be.
Right.
Everybody else is kind of ignoring him because he has problems,
and that's probably why
what's pushing him.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's probably why Richard Kelly's trying to project this, going back to what it's like to be a teenager.
Yeah.
And I think that's the core of it all.
Yeah, teenagers in a bubble.
Just, all over. Have you seen Donnie Darko? Hey, you put dark in the movie? I'm supposed to, as I said, you put dark in the movie, I kind of like it, and I kind of do. I like the aesthetic of it. I like, but it's hard to watch because you're forcing me to enjoy mundane, and that's my life, mundane.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why I like to write stories that couldn't happen, is because I don't like I live the stories that can.
That's why I like People Under the Stairs, because I don't have people under my stairs
that he knows of. But what did you think about the film? And what do you think about Richard Kelly as a director, as a writer? We've seen a couple of.
He might be punking us and just doing this so we can talk about a movie for 30 minutes that we hate or like or whatever.
I mean, it caused us to revisit it. So
Yeah.
thank you, S. Darno, for that.
Yeah.
And while you're down checking out that comment section and letting us know your thoughts on the film, don't forget to give a like and give a subscribe. They're two free things that you can do that help support the channel, and also make sure that you never miss an episode of Kyle and Nick on Film. While you're down there as well, you can also check out that Patreon that Nick mentioned before. We've got tiers as low as $1, and with that, you get access to the Patreon account. You get access to Picks with Kyle and Nick, our monthly show of exclusive episodes, and you also have opportunities to help us select future episodes of the show, which sound fantastic, because if you're a person who wants me to sit through S. Darko, I know I'm going to have to sooner or later. That's your opportunity.
It's a hard digest. Right?
But thank you from all of us here at the show, and you can find my film reviews at goatfilmreviews.com.
I'm Nick, the host of the St. Paul Filmcast, a podcast, anywhere you find podcasts. So there you go.
There you go.
We're just going to end it with not being clever. We're just going to end like Donnie Darko.
Let's just brew it a little bit.